So hello everyone. This will be a rather short presentation and a rather general one, and it's intended for institutions. And there will be another one in 2 days, and this one will be more focused on researchers. So today I won't mention some things that are specific to researchers. The idea to to talk about the benefits of repositories for institutions, for research institutions, and for institutional leaders. Uh, First of all, my presentation will be based on my experience, so I will focus the things that I identified through my work as important and as relevant, and and I will cover some questions that are usually asked when talking about repositories and when trying to build this infrastructure. So it's very important to understand that institutional repositories, national repositories, are a very specific infrastructure, and they are crucial in research workflows, in tracking research, in promoting research. They are crucial. One of the questions that we had in Serbia and elsewhere when we started building institutional repositories was like, so we have our website, an institutional website, and we have a list of all of our our research outputs, publications there. We regularly update this list. Sometimes we upload those journal articles on the website, institutional website. Why would we need a repository? Or we are using ResearchGate, so why do we need a repository? Or we are indexed in the Web of Science, so why would we need a repository? Everybody who wants to know about us can find something that is important there. And it's very important. So you see from these questions that those people who ask such questions, they don't really understand the meaning and the purpose of the repository. And this should be explained. This is one of the first things that needs to be understood. So repository is not just any website, not just an ordinary website. It's also not a database that an institution may create. So, for example, when you have those IT research institutes or sometimes mathematical institutes, etc. So they have skilled IT people, and then they create some in-house databases and they use them. Sometimes these databases are not available online. So repository is not quite this. Repositories is an online platform. And it collects, preserves, and provides access to scholarly content. And it's not just about the metadata. So the repository also has full text content. So it has full files. Sometimes these files are not publicly visible because they can't be visible for many reasons, for copyright reasons, for example, but they are there, they're in the repository. So it's not just a database containing metadata, like, for example, Scopus or the Web of Science. Also, what makes a difference between an ordinary website or this in-house database is are the standards. So the repository relies on standard metadata schemas, standard protocols for metadata exchange. This is not really important for you as a user, so you can use it without knowing this. But for decision makers, it's very important because those things make it possible for a repository to exchange metadata with other services and to disseminate the results of research work. So that's actually crucial. So you don't need to know how to make this, but it's very important to understand that those standards are really important, and when you talk to service providers, to ask those questions. So repositories can be institutional, they can be national, they can be disciplinary or thematic. There are different types of repositories. A new repository is a national repository. So basically, you don't need to talk to IT people, you don't need to spend additional resources. You already have this repository and it's aligned with the standards. So it's very important to understand this. And it already meets all the requirements, technical requirements that a digital repository should meet. Each repository can be searched and browsed. Browsing is it's like quite optimized in your type of repository because you have different types of entities. So you can search for, you can browse research outputs, you can browse projects, people, institutions, and journals. And this type of the repository that you have is particularly suitable for this, for tracking the results on the institutional level, etc. It can also be searched. And what is typical of the search functionality in repositories is that it also searches the full text. So it's not like Scopus that doesn't have access, or Web of Science that don't have access to the full text. When you deposit the full text in a repository, and if the text is readable, if it's not just scan text, the repository will index this text, and you will find, for example, in the search results, you will find publications that contain the keywords that you searched for, even if those keywords are not mentioned in the metadata. This is particularly convenient for searching. The ranking of those results, search results, is not perfect, but you should know that this is something typical of repositories. It's not that your platform is not good enough. It's just typical because that's how the search works in the repository. So if you turn off this full text search, you won't be able to find everything, and that's something that we usually tell to our users. What I meant by structured metadata, this is how it looks. So when you enter the metadata in the repository, you have an ordinary human readable form. So it says title and you put the title. But actually the system translates this into these fields. And those fields are important for communication between machines. And that's all you need to know about this. You don't need to know anything more. So the project team made sure that this is aligned with standards, but this is how it looks. And there are also other protocols, I won't be showing them, that actually display this metadata to other machines as well. So it's all taken care of. You don't need to worry about this. Also, what is typical of repositories is that you can make all the content restricted, closed, which you shouldn't do because you want your content to be seen. You can make it open access if you wish, everything. And this is how it is now, because everything that you have in your national repository is open access at the moment. But you can also control access in a very sophisticated way. So if something needs to be closed, because for various reasons, for copyright, for any other reason, this access can be restricted to particular groups of users or just to administrators. So technically it is possible to take care about this. And this is what we usually say to institutions and also to researchers, that they don't need to worry. It's very important for them and for the repository to deposit the full text. And the team who is curating, who is managing the repository, will know how to protect this content. And there is actually no risk of any copyright infringement, and the team who manages the repository knows how to handle these things. So there is no need to worry. It's not a social media website where anybody can upload anything. Here, this is controlled. And also you can publish different versions. So if you have an updated version of an article, or also if you're depositing research data, then you have a new version. You can deposit various versions, and those versions can be linked. So here I provide examples from my institutional repository. And we have, for example, we deposit different versions of an article, because if article is copyrighted, it's in a subscription-based journal, we can't make the final version publicly available, but we can make available the author-accepted manuscript. And then we link all those versions in the repository so that anybody knows where to find which version. And also on the right, you can see something that you won't be seeing as a user, but this is something that a repository manager sees. So no records are accepted in the repository unless they are approved by a repository manager. So you can deposit something that shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be of an appropriate quality, but somebody will take care about this, and the record will be rejected and returned to the person who has submitted it to make the necessary corrections. So somebody takes care about this, and there is no risk that you can do something wrong. As for visibility, repositories really boost your visibility much better than social media websites, much better than any indexing database, because most of those indexing databases are subscription based. Somebody needs to pay in order to access. Repository offers the open metadata, and various aggregators can use this metadata, which is beneficial for researchers and for research institutions. So here I provide two examples. One on the right is Google Scholar, which is particularly interesting for researchers. So your repository is really well covered. It's really well indexed by Google Scholar, so anybody using Google Scholar can find those research outputs that are in the repository. And on the left, you can see a major aggregator of repositories and journals base. It's based in Germany, and its indexes thousands and thousands of repositories all over the world. And you can see that your repository delivers metadata through those, as I mentioned, machine readable protocols. It communicates with this aggregator and delivers metadata there is a plan when the project is nearly finished to register the repository with there are a few other aggregators that can also improve the visibility, and there is a plan to do this with your repository, and this really boosts your visibility. And I will show two examples also from my repository. So here on the right, top right, you have an article. And this article, this is a book actually. This book is a print book, but a PDF was made available in a repository. And some years ago, I think it was during the pandemic. And Google Scholar, this is a record from Google Scholar, and Google Scholar shows that it has been cited more than 200 times, which is the information that the author of this book, or us, we wouldn't know this without this book being available in repository and being visible, indexed by Google Scholar. So this is an interesting information, so the author can go there and see who has cited this book, and also anybody who can. So this book is out of print; it can't be purchased, but it's available online, and anybody can go to Google Scholar, find this book, and can download it and read it. Also, on the left, down left, bottom left, you can see an article. It was published in 2012. And at that time, when this article was published, this journal wasn't available online. It didn't have a website. So we scanned this article and we uploaded it in our repository, institutional repository. And this article became very popular. This journal is a national journal. It's not indexed in any international databases like Scopus and Web of Science, and it will probably never be indexed there. But the article was interesting to many users, and it's cited more than 100 times. And it's even cited in a very prestigious study on water on Mars. And it's also cited in more than 50 journals that are indexed by Web of Science. This would have never happened without this article being available in the repository. And the message that I want to convey is that you actually never know, or that users need something and that something has a potential to be cited, unless you make it publicly available and open access so that other people can use it. So for us, these two examples were unexpected. We didn't expect so many citations and such an interest in those things. So this is a rather complex diagram. You will get a presentation. I will just briefly mention what it wants to say. So you see different services around OpenAir, GoTripple based. These are various international services and aggregators. And in the middle is your repository. So your repository has different ways. Technically, it has different ways of transferring, actually delivering metadata to different services. And you don't need to think about this. It is all set up. It happens while you sleep. It's your only task is to make things available in the repository, and then everything else, once when it's set up with so you see base, you're already indexed there. But once the project is finished, your repository will also be visible in OpenAir, and then OpenAir will distribute your metadata to other services, and you don't need to do anything about this. This happens automatically because this infrastructure is adjusted for this. And it also delivers metadata to Google Scholar and the different services. And if you're using reference managers, you can also reuse this metadata. So this is an illustration of how technically the repository boosts your visibility. So why is it good for institutions, and why is it good for institutions to have a centralized repository? So in Serbia, we don't have a centralized repository, unfortunately. It's much cheaper to have a centralized repository, and it's much easier to manage it. Unfortunately, we couldn't come to this agreement because the landscape is very fragmented. Different institutions wanted to have their own. Some institutions didn't want to have it. The ministry wasn't ready to fund it. And we ended up with a huge number of repositories, which is actually good that we have them, but basically it's very difficult to manage them, and especially it's very difficult to align them, to align the standards and the metadata and the quality of metadata that they are providing. So the first benefit of a centralized repository is that you can have good coordination. You have a central team, and the team is actually providing instructions and guidelines to everybody else, and it's much easier to align everything. And it's also much easier to preserve things because you need to have an agreement between Grena and the library, the repository, and you have this preservation ensured. If you have 100 repositories, as we have approximately in Serbia, it's very difficult to make those arrangements for preservation. Also, it saves a lot of resources because as an institution, you don't have to invest in equipment because repositories are stored on some servers. Then you need to ensure security. Then you need to have your own team who will maintain this hardware, and the guys who will need to maintain software. And also, it's less effort for your administration because there is some administrative work. You need to pay some outsourced collaborators, etc. If you have a central repository, you don't have to worry about this. And also, it's very important for institutions because although it's a centralized repository, you still have your own distinct profile. So as I showed on the first slide, you have institutional profiles, and this is how it looks. Let me go here, and I will return then. So on the right, you have on the left and on the right, you have an institutional profile. You can add some information about this. And on the left, you have the publications that deposited by an institution, and on the right, you also have researchers who are employed with this institution. So you still have your own profile. You can give this link, and anybody can come and see your outputs there. And also you have some metrics, so they are not really representative at the moment, but when you start using the repository more, you will also have some metrics, views, downloads, etc. So this is something that you have in the central repository. This is what most institutions need. For example, in my institutional repository, this is very difficult to achieve. We had to make a workaround because our software is slightly different. So you already have this, and you don't really need to worry. Also, what is very important is that the repository will assign DOIs. And this will, for example, if you have a print-only publication and you deposit it in the repository, it will still have a DOI, and this will improve the findability of your research outputs as an institution. So I will show an example how we integrated repositories in the workflows, institutional workflows. On the right, you can see the website. Top right, this is a website, the menu on the website of a research institute, a major research institute in Serbia. And previously, they have more than 300 researchers. And previously, they actually needed a lot of effort to update the lists of their publications on the website because they publish a lot, and they would just provide references with links, nothing more than that. Now they abandon this practice. They don't need to do this anymore. So they deposit all their publications in the repository, and on the website they just provide a link to the repository. This is something you can do as well. So you don't need to maintain those lists on the website because this is time consuming and it doesn't really have an effect. You can just link to your pages in the central national repository. Also, you can use repositories to generate reports, because if you have all the publications there, it's very easy to generate annual reports or project reports, because you also have projects in the repository. Also, if you're in a university, you can deposit all PhD and master's thesis in the repository so that anybody can see this. This is where we use repositories a lot. So our research institutes and universities have accreditation procedures. Universities have two accreditation procedures, for teaching and for research. And then they need to provide some lists of publications as evidence for accreditation, and they're using repository there. So they provide links to the repository. Also, in promotion procedures, that's what we are using, and I will show you a slide here. That's how we are using. On the right, you can see a page from a report that is used in a promotion procedure for a researcher. So this researcher has publications in the repository, and she provided all the links and she didn't have, so she has links in her bibliography, and she didn't need to provide physical copies. Otherwise, she would have had to provide physical copies of those publications. But they're available in the repository, so it's relieving for the administration, because they don't have to prepare those copies, they don't have to deal with them, and it's just, you can submit all the materials online. So it's actually beneficial for institutions, and it improves workflows. Also, if you have a repository, you can provide resources for university courses there. You can also put teaching materials in a repository, or, for example, some reading lists. So you can provide links to the repositories to students, and ask them to go to the repository to find and download those papers that they need to read for exams and for assignments. And I explained this last example that is actually something that people usually ask most. Uh, Also, what we saw in Serbia, and what was a strong incentive for institutions to use repositories, because we have a number of very good successful success stories, is that they realize that they can build their institutional archives. So institutions normally want to have an archive of everything that they are producing. It's good for, we have institutions that last for decades, and they want to have these. And now this is possible. If you have a repository, you don't have to invest additional resources into this. Of course, if you want to scan, but if you already have scanned some materials and have digital born materials, then you can use the repository. So apart from current research, which is important for, I don't know, tracking the results. So if you have national open access or institutional open access policies, or you have to comply with funder mandates, then the focus is usually on current research. But in Serbia, it turned out that institutions really wanted to deposit historical publications, because, like you, we have a specific alphabet and we have our own language, and institutions want to make those materials. It's a history, it's heritage, so they wanted to make those materials available, and we encourage them to do this, and we explain them what to do, how to streamline this process, and then they actually started depositing those materials. So at first, some institutions would deposit, I don't know, a back file of the past 10 years, and then they started adding additional materials. So now we have some institutions really have really significant collections of those materials, and they've been made over the past 5 years. And also, it's very interesting because you will, when you start talking to your repository development team, you will see that each institution has something that is important to this institution. So some institutions have like photo collections, some institutions have some interesting brochures, some institutions have posters. For example, my institute, my colleagues wanted to make their posters, conference posters available, and we enabled this. So you will see that there are some interesting things that can be made available in a repository, because repositories accept different types of research outputs. And you will be able to see as an institution what is important for you. One of the typical use cases, for example, and I'm providing, when you get the presentation, you will be able to explore those links. So in this last case with special collections, we had a request from an institute in Serbia. They were conducting a project about multilingual inscriptions on tombstones, and they had field research materials, photos, and they wanted to make these photos available in a repository. And it was a kind of a success story, because we helped them do this, and now when they are citing those photos in their research papers, they have a persistent identifier in the repository, and then they can cite those photos. So they say this photo is available in this repository, and just follow the link and go there. And this is a good way to integrate publications with other research outputs, and it's a really nice collection. It's quite unique. So I already explained this. So you have your institutional profile, and you can organize this accordingly, and it looks really nice. I mean, people can add their photos, they can add information from their CV. So it's really an incentive for researchers, but also for institutions to use this. How can you contribute to the development of the central repository? So what would be the most important and what would be the most beneficial is to think about adopting an institutional open science policy. So in Serbia, we have a national policy. We also have institutional policies. There are different approaches to policies. So you can have a national policy, but if it's too difficult to adopt one, you can start with institutional policies as well. So if you adopt an institutional policy, it's important to integrate the repository in this policy. So this policy usually says that the researchers who are publicly funded or who work at the institution are required to deposit all their works and make them available in open access in a specific repository, and you can indicate the specific repository, the national repository. And once you adopt such a policy, researchers, of course, they have to align with this policy, and then you provide them institutional support how to do this. But this actually increases the deposit rates and also the quality of deposits, because they know that somebody is, monitoring this process. Also, it's very important to insist on depositing the full text of publication. So there are some researchers who don't want for any reason to deposit the full text. Some of them might be lazy. So it's very important for you as an institution not to accept, unless it's really justified, not to accept deposits without the full text. So I would strongly advise for this, because this is the value of your repository rests on the content it offers. If it offers only the metadata, then there is no much interest among the audience for going there, because they can find that metadata in other sources. So they will go to your repository, they will visit your repository and use it if you have the full text content. Also, it's very important to collaborate with libraries to collect, to identify, and to prepare those materials. So when you start working in a repository, you don't have to deposit everything immediately. It's a process. It requires some planning. So, and depositing is only one half of the tasks that you have to do. So the central team will talk to the to libraries and to institutions to see what they have, what is ready for depositing, what can have the priority. And this will be different from an institution to another. So there is no one size fits all. It's like this is something that you need to talk about, and institutional leaders should try to facilitate this process as much as possible. Also, it's very important, like in the example I'm providing this on the right, to require researchers to provide links to the repositories in their bibliographies and reports. So if they have a promotion procedure and they need to submit a bibliography, you tell them, provide the link from the repository, and they will find a way how to make content available there. And it's also a process, but it's one of the measures that is usually quite efficient and helps you achieve results in very short time. And it's very important to collaborate with the repository team. So now the project is still going on, but very soon it will be finished. And the project team is currently so the project team is currently depositing stuff in the repository, and they are using those forms. So these forms are sent offline, sent via email to institutions. And on the left, you have the form for authors, because the authors should provide some information for their profiles. And on the right, you have a form for publications, the metadata. So these are the metadata, and the metadata is provided in the forms, and then the team enters this metadata in the repository. After the end of the project, institutions will have their own repository managers, and researchers will be able to deposit themselves in the repository. But this may not be convenient to all researchers. For example, senior researchers prefer when somebody else does this for them. So it might be convenient to keep those forms. So as an institutional leader, you should just explain that there are multiple ways. It's also very important to allocate staff at the institutional level, and there will be training provided by the project team. So there should be at least one person responsible for the communication with the project management team, with the central team of the repository, and also a person who will be trained to approve those deposits, or to deposit themselves in the repository for the institution. It's also a process. You need to be patient. Naturally, the best thing is if it is a person from a library. And it's very important to understand that it's not a side job for librarians. So maintaining a repository is a major job, and it needs to have the priority. So if you're assigning a librarian to do this, then this librarian should be freed from some other tasks. So it's very important for institutional leaders to understand this. It's also because repositories need to be sustainable, and they need funding, they need support, etc. It's very important that you, as institutional leaders, talk publicly about the benefits of repositories, that you present best practice, present good, good experience with collaboration, good examples, and also to advocate with the national authorities to establish a funding model that will ensure the sustainability of the repository, because it's beneficial for you to have this repository. So it's important. It's not, this something that is just the responsibility of the library, of the central team. This is something that you should also talk about in public. And it's also important to include the repository in search assessment procedures, in promotion procedures, because this is an incentive for researchers to start using it more actively. That's all from me.